We are talking to Brian Tarquin. Welcome to Redera.
Yes, hi.
Hi. You have this a beautiful book on the Insider's Guide to Music Licensing. Can you explain to our readers and listeners how the music industry has evolved in the last 10 years and how the whole arrangement between the music providers and the music buyers?
Sure. You know, the music industry has changed quite a bit. It used to be reliable on, mechanicals, and placement was kind of a secondary market for record labels and publishers. They made a lot of their money through basically sales. But since the implosion of physical sales and the disappearance of physical market, especially with huge retailers like Tower, who had over 200 stores in the country, there's no longer that sales. And of course, with the emerging internet and iTunes and both downloads, MP3s, and streaming, that market really kind of went away with the dodo bird. So now you find yourself as an artist, selling records online really through downloads, and probably only selling physical just to support a tour at the tour itself. So with that, publishers such as Warner Chappell and Universal, they have gone out and they've bought large production music catalogs, such as the Universal buying First Come and of course Master Source Music and loads of other men killer tracks, and a lot of the large companies like Nonstop bought by Warner Chappell and so forth. So with all of that came an emergence of music licensing. And when I first got started over 25 years ago, music licensing was kind of looked down upon on the record industry. Now it's they're trying to make their living out of that at this point because sales no longer exist. So with the large immersing areas of music licensing, either on the internet, shows, Netflix, traditional broadcast with stations like NBC, ABC, or even cable, you basically had everybody making a mad dash try to license their music. And I always knew that licensing music was much better, was much more reliable, and certainly could be a great source of income even on the back end through the years. So I had started out basically in records and started out then got involved with doing a lot of score, music licensing, a lot of licensing a lot of tracks off of my records, and also just doing custom score years ago. And I've seen the whole change come about. So a book like this is kind of invaluable for that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Valuable.
Thank you very much for that overview. And of course, there are more and more cable television channels and the broadcast channels, and you explained quite well that there's a master fee and there's a sync fee, and then there are different markets, as you said, digital market, radio market, and foreign license market. Would you walk through so that way a new emerging artist can understand what is the landscape in each of these segments out there?
Well, it's kind of it's a hard thing to walk through that quickly, but all in all, you have two sides to basically a song. You have the master and the sync. And the master is obviously the actual recording of the song, and the sync is the publishing side of the song. And generally, that's what you were licensed, and that's how generally, traditionally, film and television would license a track. They'd have to take a separate license for each, because historically, not everybody owns both sync and master. And so you could have an artist maybe control a portion of it, meaning maybe the publishing side of it, and a record company controlling, the master side of it. And in some cases, it could be like 5 or 6 writers, maybe 3 or 4 different publishers. So this is how music production libraries came into existence, because they wanted to have the songs controlled 100%. So somebody, a music supervisor or production, would go to them and be able to license the sync and the master and the whole kit and caboodle from them in one shot. Otherwise, with TV and broadcast, everything needs to be done right away. They don't have time to find the 4 different publishers, maybe a couple in Europe and a couple in Asia, and the master's owned by another entity, record label in America. So it makes it hard to kind of search out. So that's kind of what simple breakdown of it is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You also explain in the book there are 2 very good cases that you have, which is the master source and the also with the interview with Jonathan Furstenberg with the music producer. Can you explain what do they do and how they have been different in the market out there? What is the master source and how the music creators can benefit from it?
What you have is, to find the music supervisors. That's, if you're a music creator, if you're an artist or a library, you have to find who actually places the songs. And there's a few different ways that you can find that. There's different sources, such as music registry and so forth, that give a list of the breakdowns. And of course, it's no secret to all this. So it's become a much more crowded marketplace now. So everybody and their brothers have a music library, and they're trying to have their music licensed, because they also know the benefits of the back end as well. Now, with that being said, there has been this fairly new emergence after the past decade of giving the music away, which is not really a great thing, because they think if you give the music away, you'll get more airplay, thus you'll get more back end from the PROs like ASCAP, BMI, and SESAC. But, that is kind of a myth, because what happens is you lower the standards of music. And so then sync fees are taken away. And quite frankly, not all channels pay the same to ASCAP, BMI, and SESAC for their licensing fees. So I know guys who have done this with the History Channel or a small TLC network, and it's pennies on the dollar, the back end, because obviously the History Channel is paying a lot less of a license fee to ASCAP, BMI, and SESAC than ABC or NBC. So it can kind of bite you in the end, and plus you kind of screw it up for the rest of the people out there, because once you set a precedent of giving the music away, you're not going to get the guys to pay for it anymore unless it's a huge hit song or something, or a classic track.
Yes. I think in the chapter 4, you kind of explain that there are different organizations, like you mentioned about ASCAP and BMI and SESAC, and also you talk about a little bit of value of watermarking. Can you explain these different organizations, how they play a role, and how are they still relevant today in the digital world?
Yeah, I mean, they are relevant today at this point. What ASCAP, basically ASCAP, BMI, and SESAC are performance right organizations, which means that anytime your music is played in public places or over the radio or in TV film or on broadcast networks or even just cable, you'll get paid a fee for how long it's been played, and there's all sorts of templates of how it's played or how it's paid, because basically what it is that you will get paid for the amount of time, but it's going to be also weighed by where it's played, at what time it's played. So if it's played at midnight or 1 in the morning as opposed to 3 in the afternoon, as opposed to prime time at 8 or 9, and that's kind of the way they all weight their payments to people. It's a flawed system. It always was. I've been a member of all of them, and SESAC to me was always the fairest, that you could go back and negotiate, talk to them, and they'll listen. The other two won't, unless you're Tom Petty or some very large artist. But I see a time probably in the future that PROs won't be relevant anymore, and I think people are going to start doing direct licensing. But at this time, they're still relevant, and any artist should join them because they can take care of a lot of the administrative work as far as registering songs and so forth, and also be able to work on your behalf if your songs are being actively used in broadcast.
And I think in the book you talked about the earlier your time when you were involved with the Procter & Gamble soap operas, and then the watermarking was created. And what is the value of the watermarking?
Well, the watermarking was the best system that I ever saw because basically it was two levels. Basically, today they use they use like the BDS, which is like a fingerprint. But it doesn't have as long-reaching as the watermarking. The watermarking worked where you'd have to watermark the song physically before mastering. Then once it went out, then Verance at the time had all of these monitoring systems around the country. And they would monitor the songs basically by this watermark. So, each one had an individual watermark. It came through their system, they saw it, and they would compile a huge list of where it was played in the country, what station, exactly how long, and basically SESAC was the only one who paid on it. Now, I mean, it really worked, I can tell you firsthand, because I had before that 20-page statements, then I got, over 1,000-page statements when Verance was in play. I mean, it would come in a UPS big box, the statements, and it would show every airplane. Now, maybe some of the airplanes were a cent, 25 cents, $1 here and there, but it added up, but it also showed me of how much music was being used. And the important thing on the other side of it that you have to understand is that there are many local stations that don't feel that they don't have to submit cue sheets to what they use because they may be an affiliate of a large station like ABC or CBS. So for them, all of that is going through the cracks because if they're not basically submitting cue sheets and they're not getting there, then nobody is getting paid. It's the local market that I saw that the watermark really helped, which when it closed Verance from doing that, nothing ever replaced it. There was another, places like TuneSat and stuff, but they don't do the local markets, number one, and number two, they just have a fingerprint system, and their monitoring system was never as detailed and long-reaching as Verance was. So it mattered a great deal, though I don't know if it'll ever come back. The watermarking, people didn't like it because you had to watermark it right at the origination of the song. But if you could do that, I mean, it worked. I mean, it really worked, and I've never seen anything work like that again.
How important it is in the early part of the career and also later on, as after you built the business for a while, communication with the music, film and television music supervisors and editors?
Well, it's very important. I mean, that's probably your lifeline to the industry. So it depends on what level you are on the other side. If you're a composer, then it is very important to have that communication because you need to know what they are looking for. And if you're composing for a show, you have to have, like when I composed for All My Children for years, I did that over a decade. I was in constant contact with them every day to know what he wanted. I composed for MTV for a long time as well, and I was I was in contact with the music supervisor all the time to know what they want because things change. They may give you an idea on Monday and change it by Tuesday, and maybe due by Friday. So you have to keep close communications with that.
Could you give some tips for making that communication very successful? I think you go on to describe there are 7 tips to make make you successful through the music supervisors and editors.
Yeah, I mean, in the book, it tells you, exactly to keep the communications and always send them, what you're working on before you finish it. Because the worst thing you want to do is do a song and then get to it and think that it's okay and have a finished product, give it to them, and they have nothing but changes. And so I think you have to have them listen to it as you're doing it. I think that's a very important thing.
So involve them and keep them involved in the whole process while you're creating it.
Yeah, you have to keep them involved. That's right.
Yeah. How the digital age, I mean, you have a long history of being in the industry. And if you can kind of explain or throw a historical overview that how the digital distribution has evolved and how the digital age is likely to change even more going forward for the brick and mortar as well, for the distribution.
Yeah, as far as distribution, brick and mortar is pretty much gone. I mean, there are stores in the country. I mean, you could go overseas to Japan and they still are like 80% brick and mortar and only 20% digital. They're behind us. They're probably like, 15 years behind us. But I think that in America, digital distribution is really the only way you got to go at this point, unless you have a very large special release, like a band Journey or AC/DC, who will just do a direct deal with Walmart and just have them release it. So pretty much people don't, unfortunately, I mean, I love physical products, but people don't do that anymore. Everybody has an iPhone or a smartphone, and they download their records. So really the digital age is here to stay, and it's just going to basically be that kind of model from this point forward. I mean, I'm glad in a way that it is about physical, because there's not going to be any more, reserves for physical product and taken and through the distributor and through the record label. I was from the brick and mortar days, and that's what you had to do, and they would release these reserves quarterly, but it's a one-way sale, which is nice. So I think you have to probably embrace it all, for the digital age.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And in the digital age also, there are many different platforms, of course, iTunes and Rhapsody and Napster and all kinds of different platforms out there. How music creators should be aware, or what they should be aware of in dealing with different platforms or different companies?
Pretty much, I mean, they all pretty much work the same. iTunes is kind of the bread and butter of it all, unless you do specialty music, maybe, some other smaller platform, but they all work the same way. You don't really, as an artist, you'd want to get digital distribution, just like physical distribution. I mean, you don't want to approach each one on your own, and there's a lot of digital distribution companies that do that, and get the music ready and put it up for each platform and deliver it to, because they have to encode it and so forth. So they're pretty much all the same.
On the royalty side and on the copyright side, would you be able to comment or discuss a little bit about that how the royalties and copyrights and kind of what can you expect from all these things, the back end, and various nuances involved in the negotiations as well?
Well, it depends on what royalties, but, as an artist, you have to be aware, you have to be aware of the PROs and, of course, be a member of one of them. There's also neighboring rights societies as well. That's in other countries. However, it's tricky because you would have to have had your album, somewhere along the line had been done in another country in order to, as an American artist, in order to, collect from them. So I joined SESAC because my albums were worldwide and on record labels back in the day. So they're able to, and they're out of the Netherlands, and they're able to give me royalties that way as they were played. as a new artist, I think, Sound Exchange is kind of the equivalent here in America. So I think it's probably, something like that, where you'd have to be involved with all of the, try to get involved with all of these companies. Probably you should go to, any of these summits and become focused on exactly what you want to do. If you want to be an artist, if you want to be a composer, if you want to do both, and see what's in your best interest to these companies to join.
From the copyright perspective and from the legal side, what do you think or what would you advise that the music composer and publishers should watch out for?
Well, always copyright your music. Get your music copyrighted. You could do it as in a collective form, so you don't have to pay for each song to be copyrighted. And you can copyright under a collective kind of bunch of songs under a certain title. And for that, that'll protect you against anything. I gave a couple of examples in the book, but that'll protect you against anybody who uses your music and doesn't want to pay you, any stinking master, because that'll be a copyright infringement. So it's always good to make sure you're copywritten with everything, and stay on top of just having the form that they send you back is, stamped and when it was copyrighted, what date, and so forth, because that can help you in the later part of it. I had this thing with the Weather Channel where they had used a bunch of my music, and I had copywritten all of it, and I said they settled out of court because they were in copyright infringement, and they knew they were. I'd actually taped the show too back in the VHS days, and I had proof of that too. So and they knew it, and they always do know it. So it's just a matter of how much they try to get away with. And, it's always good to get legal advice, get an entertainment lawyer as well.
Right, exactly. Going international is always very attractive, and international market is a very broad market. You have European market, Asian markets, Latin American markets, and other markets as well. What would you advise before you go international, what you should watch out for, or how you should negotiate?
Well, it would be depending upon what you want to negotiate and what you're looking for as far as with your music. I mean, is it an international record deal? Is it an international deal for licensing? I mean, these are things that you have to be aware of. I would advise not to go international until you actually would be able to get something established here in the States. Because it's a lot easier to deal with the States than certainly, another country, with another language and another time frame and so forth.
Are there certain things that you can tell them just not to do, or just don't even entertain in doing so, or certain things that you can watch out for while dealing with international markets or even domestic markets?
Well, I mean, you have to, read all the contracts, certainly, and it's hard to say, ahead of time. But, I would, before you do anything, I'd get legal advice. That's the best way I could put it, probably, because, you're going to need to know, because it's all going to depend upon what you're looking for, as an artist or a composer, or if you're just going to be, a company licensing music to the shows and broadcasts. So the best thing to do is kind of get it on paper or on the agreement, and you have to see. Always try. The one thing is always keep your copyright and always keep your masters and your publishing. There are certain companies out there today that feel like that they even give away their publishing just to get the airplay. Doesn't seem to make any sense to me of why you're giving everything away just to get played on the History Channel. There is no great award for that, and it's just a small channel, and really, in the end of the day, nobody cares. So you really have to get, to me, I don't like it. That's really pay to play to me. And I'm not, I just don't come from that school, pay to play. if they want to use the music, they pay you. You don't pay them. And I see that increasingly in the market today, where people are just giving away their publishing, giving away everything, voiding sync fees, and it's a bad precedent to really start for this kind of music, for music licensing, because it's just going to go worse.
Mm-hmm. Towards the end of the book, you have a interview with different insiders, and one of them is with Dan Kimple, I think, with the new parameters of film and television. What are the new parameters?
Well, I think if you read his comments, you'll see. But the new parameters are what I've been describing. Unfortunately, music with the digital age has been demoralized and devalued. And what's going on at this point is you have to it's much more competitive because everybody, like I said earlier, everybody wants to get airplay. So they're coming up with new ways to get it. Not voiding sync and master license, giving away publishing. So this is all the new parameters of what's going on. It's a positive thing in some ways, but you have to, definitely see the negative things, because a lot of this is, like I said earlier, demoralizing and devaluing the music altogether, because it's just, kind of like a free-for-all giving music away. And you have to find a niche. You have to find your own voice, and you're going to have to find, creative partners that you can work with and still say, keep your soul of the music.
Right, exactly. How did you get in the music industry? How did you get involved with the music? And give us a little bit flavor of what is not out there about you, so our listeners can get to know you even better.
Okay, well, I started a long time ago in the 80s, and I started in records and in the studio, assistant engineering, and also then I went to jingles, and I started with jingles with that. And during the jingle days is where I kind of, discovered the production music and how this whole thing could work with the composer and so forth. So, I started doing a lot of work with soap operas, and back in the day, Guiding Light and the Procter & Gamble shows. And then also I went to writing for, like Models Inc. That was a spelling show back in the day. And then, of course, Melrose Place. And, I started to see how lucrative this was, and there was a void in the marketplace for that. And it's something that the record industry ignored, or kind of like shrugged its nose at. And it's funny because publishers never gave a second thought to television airplay. Now they're begging for television airplay because there's no more sales for records. But so I got involved with that, and at the same time, I had worked at record companies, Virgin Records in Beverly Hills, and I actually worked in business affairs, so I kind of got a real good understanding of how contracts work, what was expected, what recoupment meant. And, also worked at Restless Records before BMG bought it. And that was, I was doing radio promotion as well in there, and all the time being an artist as well. And so I kind of saw everything from the studio, from the other side of the glass, all the way to basically, in the record company and how it worked and and the inner workings of the monster. So, I got signed to a couple record deals, one being Instinct Records in New York, and I did a lot of, it was an acid jazz records, but it crossed over to smooth jazz. I had a number of hits there in the smooth jazz. So I toured with George Benson and Kenny G and a lot of those guys that were big in that marketplace, Lee Ritenour. And then, I was, because they used my music so much at television because it was instrumental, I naturally kind of went to the composing side and just started, composing for all these shows. Mm-hmm. And I was very lucky you get involved with them, and I won 3 Emmys for music composition, and it's been a great ride. You know, I was involved with the records back in the day, and we could sell a lot, and even one album like the Acid Jazz. This is Acid Jazz Volume 2. I mean, that went Billboard Top 20, and then the solo record sold well, and so then so all of that, it was all vehicles, all happening at the same time, and it was kind of all in turn. So it just kept motivating me and propelling me further. And kind of now I'm involved with all of the Guitar Master series. I work with a lot of famous guitarists, and I've used all of my skills to do that as well. I write, produce, and play on all these songs with famous guitarists like Steve Morse, Bumblefoot from Guns N' Roses, Gary Hoey, and just a myriad of guys, Frank Ambali, and just great players. I opened up my own imprint, releasing, tracks from Jeff Beck, Steve Vai, Jimmy Cage, Santana. So it's and so I've seen the insides of how this whole thing works, and it's changed quite a bit. But I consider myself lucky to have been involved with it at a time when it was still going strong. So.
Mm-hmm. How did you get involved in writing? It's one thing to compose beautiful music and sell it. It takes another skill set, which you have many. What brought you to writing?
I initially did this to write the book for basically for guys out there that didn't know what was going on, because I wish I had a book like this when I was doing it, coming up through the ranks 25 years ago, because I just kind of learned on the job and just, kind of trial by error. But, there was no real book that you could really refer to about music licensing. Nobody really wrote a book like that, and it was kind of a void in the marketplace. So I wanted to supply a book of all the knowledge that I gained and what I've all done in a book, so that people could, understand it. So guys who were starting out could read and say, oh, that's how that works. How did this? I remember when I was writing for a production company back in New York years and years ago, and when I was first starting out, and he just said join ASCAP, and I just joined ASCAP. I didn't know there was actually any kind of alternative, that there was a choice, that you had BMI and SESAC, that you could do that. So, and I didn't really know what ASCAP truly was and how it worked, and then all my music was getting placed in all these shows, Melrose Place and for the Olympics back then. And then I saw the checks come in, and I was like, oh, this is what this whole thing is about. And then, as I, delved further into it and investigated, that's what I did. The best thing to do when you're starting out is ask questions. Ask as many questions as you can, because, that will suit you and that will help you out to know how this whole thing works. It's not like a 9-to-5 job. You know what you get paid for, and that was its salary. And you kind of have to know what's going on. I always had run-ins with these guys from ASCAP and BMI, because these guys were very flippant on the phone back then. Whatever, who cares? That kind of thing. But I told them, I said, listen, you get paid your job whether you do or you don't over there every day. I mean, this is my job, and I need to be able to get paid and understand how I'm getting paid. So that's why I was always pretty tenacious about that.
Yeah, and you've written several books now. I think you have at least 4 or 5 books, or maybe more.
Yeah, I have 7 books I've done. There's 2 more coming out this year. One's a Guitar Encyclopedia amplifier book, and then I did another one that probably interests your readers. It's called basically Survival Guide to Music Composers. Mm-hmm. Too afraid to get paid. That's kind of the new book. So it's that'll be out on Hal Lindes. That's coming out at the end of the year in December.
Oh, excellent. Hopefully you'll be able to talk again about those 2 books when they're published by the end of the year.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, and then the Guitar Amplifier Encyclopedia, that comes out in August.
In August. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time. It was delightful to hear your views, and you have a long career in the music industry, and certainly, hopefully, many other budding musicians will benefit from this.
I hope so. That's why I did it. I really wanted people to really benefit from all of this because it's tough. It's a tough thing, and you need certainly people to help you out through it, and, because it's becoming tougher and tougher as we go along as well, because there's more people, and you used to be able. I remember being able to just go into a post-production with a CD or a DAT, and they would just take it right off the DAT and put it in the show. Today, those days are over. It's all a whole different world now.
Thank you very much. We have been speaking with Brian Tarquin, the author of Insider's Guide to Music Licensing. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.